Good morning, everyone, and actually it's going to be good afternoon too, because this is a very special broadcast of EFMP Families, second quarter for 2019. My name is Kim Schuler from EFMP Assignments. On my left, I have Ms. Sandra Nichols and Airmen and Family Readiness, EFMP. On my right is Lieutenant Colonel Lisa Hoyt from Air Force Medical Operations Agency's EFMP Medical. So what we're going to do this morning is a little bit different. We are actually going to be recording this session and then play it again as a live video at 16:30 Central Daylight Time. So if you don't have an opportunity to get your question answered this morning, tune back in at 4:30 and type in your question, because we will still be here just answering the questions live. So in true fashion, as you guys have come to appreciate and are familiar with, we're going to roll right into the questions that we've received from the field. So we thoroughly appreciate you tuning in and submitting the questions ahead of time. It makes it a lot easier for us as we get ready to make sure that we are addressing as a group all of the concerns or areas that you would like a little bit more information on. So let's roll right in, ladies, shall we?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so the first one that we had was actually quite a doozy and had us doing a little bit of research, which we love because we love to learn new things. It says, my active duty spouse is currently deployed. I'm about to retire in 2 weeks after 37 years of civil service, and I'm currently caring for my 91-year-old mother in end-stage breast cancer in hospice. My husband was just selected for colonel, and we have been informed his next cross-country PCS is set to occur only a couple months after his return from deployment. I cannot leave my mother, and I cannot move her across the country. Is it possible for my husband to partial PCS while I stay in California to continue to care for her until she passes? That's question number 1. Can this be considered a hardship case? Question 2. Number 3, is there a time limit for when we would have to ship our remaining household goods? And number 4, is it possible for me to defer my move and the household until the next PCS? I'm not talking about extended storage of household goods. So that's a very in-depth question. And absolutely, we talked to a couple different folks in the Air Force Personnel Center to make sure we were able to give you a comprehensive answer rather than just saying, hey, go talk to civilian personnel, because nobody ever wants to hear that answer. So here's what we've got for you. You are able to request a secretarial housing waiver for delayed travel of a dependent due to caring for a family member of a chronic illness. That became, that was written into NDAA 2018. The time limit is generally no more than a year. And you will do the application through MyPERS. When you talk about is there a time limit for the shipping the household goods, it's generally, there's no limit for CONUS to CONUS, obviously, but if it's CONUS to overseas, you have to still have a 12 months left on your tour. So that really is just kind of the cap. And of course, that would be considered a hardship case. So absolutely, bless your heart. We're so sorry that you're going through all of that, because you guys have got your hands full, and our thoughts and prayers are with you. So definitely go down that route. And then if you have questions, please reach out and we'll be able to get you in contact with the right people that we spoke to too, if you need a little bit more in-depth information. So hopefully we've answered all of those, and we will move on to the next one. Okay, this one covers all 3 of our areas, ladies. So I've been in the Exceptional Family Member Program for 10 years. Every time we PCS, we seem to be put in a duty location that is not close to our family's healthcare needs. Question 1, can the EFMP be broken down step by step, or is there a checklist of some sort that is a basic guideline that you use? Question 2, what steps are there in place to make sure families are put in places that there is care? So Colonel Hoyt, I'm going to turn this one over to you first.
Okay.
Let you answer that first portion of the medical.
Sure. So the EFMP step can be broken down, and in fact, what we'll try to do is I can send you the flow chart or something that lays out visually very nicely the steps that each service member needs to take in order to get the family members cleared. So the first step is we got to wait for the orders to arrive. They've got to be issued to the member, so we know where to start looking for care in the available area, depending on what your needs are. So once the orders come, then and you can come into the EFMP medical office at your MTF and let them know, show them a copy of your orders, and they will provide you the proper documentation that you need to get completed, just that will lay out specifically what conditions that the family members have, and exactly what services are going to be required at the next duty location. So once that is completed, you return that back to the clinic. Then the chief of medical staff, also known as the SGH, will review your paperwork with you in person and ask any qualifying questions that may come about as a result of reviewing your records and looking at all of the documentation that you've provided. Once they've met with you, then the office there will send your paperwork to the gaining location, wherever that might be, and they will send the entire package. Once it gets there, the receiving SGH, or Chief of Medical Staff, will take a look at that paperwork and literally go down and say, they have X, Y, and Z condition, and they require X, Y, and Z services. Once they get that information, they are able to look around, not only in their MTF, but the local community, whether you're CONUS or OCONUS. They will look in the community to find out what services are available to meet your needs. If one service cannot be provided for one family member, then the result will be a non-travel recommendation. Now, we can cover, maybe it comes up in another question, what the options are when a service member receives a non-travel recommendation, but it's not the end-all be-all. So there are, I'll just want to cover it.
We cover it later.
We do, okay. Yeah. And then once we find out if services are available or not, they will send it back to the base that you're currently located at, and you will receive the information from your EFMP office. That person will sit down with you and go through your paperwork and say, here's what is available and here's what isn't, and here are your options. And you will be fully aware of what your next steps can be at that point. Absolutely. Perfect. So, and I'm just going to tag on the assignment side. So when we're talking about breaking it down, and you say each time you PCS, we seem to be put in a duty location that is not close to our family's health care needs. Just keeping in mind, each time you're selected for an assignment, you as the airman are selected in your own right. So it's without regard to EFMP status. So as you go through the screening process, and if it comes back that there is a service non-availability notice provided, that's exactly when we want you to get AFPC involved and go online and do the application. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the Facebook Live, but that's exactly when we get involved. Otherwise, we don't get involved for EFMP families because it's a voluntary change of assignment. So that is when your action comes on the airman's part. So we need you to be able to say, hey, I got this negative, what people call a negative travel or a travel disapproval. There's a lot of different terms for it. But you need to let us know what you intend to do or what you wish to do so we can make sure that you're fully aware. Also, in addition to the special needs coordinator providing the medical side, we can talk to you about the assignment side and say, here's what your options are too as well. And then Sandra will be able to talk about that too.
Thank you. And just before we go along I want to just chime in on services that are available under the Airmen and Family Readiness Centers. Once you've been screened and enrolled in EFMP, our job in the ANFRC, or Airmen and Family Readiness Center, is to sustain you in place. And so even before you move on to your gaining location, even as you're working to decide on what that assignment is going to be, I'm going to ask that you stop into the Airmen and Family Readiness Center and check with your EFMP Family Support Coordinator. Because again, our job is to sustain you in place. It doesn't matter where you are in the assignment process. We will provide you with the community resources that you need and that your family needs, of course, as you're getting ready to make your move. We provide, and we'll talk about this a little bit further as we go along with the Facebook Live, but we do provide services that will provide you with a good quality of life while you're in place. And so I'm going to hold back and not talk about all of the things that we do because we will cover that a little bit later on this morning.
Perfect. Thank you, Sandra. All right, moving on to the next one. Says we are supposed to PCS in July and just did an additional DD form 2792 for a very rare treatment. The gaining base is claiming it is available within 100 miles, but it isn't. The special needs coordinator here sent me the availability letter and said I could appeal and request a cancellation of assignment, but didn't outline how to do it. We do not have orders yet. Would you be able to help me in the process to appeal when a gaining base says they have a service that is not available? So over to you on that one.
Yes, so
part.
I had a little bit of a question of not having orders yet. So I'm guessing that the 2792 was completed in preparation for an assignment, not as a result of the assignment, which is fine because it's still within a year and it's good. With the process on the appeal, that is actually, you're able to go into the virtual, I'm sorry, not for the appeal. I was going to do the cancellations for you.
Okay.
The appeal, you simply let the special needs coordinator know, hey, I've got some new information, or any information that was omitted from the original paperwork that was submitted. So if you have either of those two items, either information omitted or additional information that is brand new that would possibly overturn that travel recommendation, let your special needs coordinator know and she can assist you with the appeal. This needs to happen within 21 days of receiving your service availability notice. And sometimes that's a challenge, understanding that, and when that happens, the special needs coordinator will contact us and ask for an exception policy to request maybe an extension of a few days to accommodate, especially if you're needing information from an off-base provider, which we know can be challenging. But in terms of the 100 miles, so when we do our screenings for the gaining location, we send all your paperwork forward. It's in a point in time search. So at that moment in that time, that when they did the search, those services were available according to the gaining facility. At any point, and this is the challenge with EFMP across the board, is that oftentimes not oftentimes, but sometimes the provider will just drop off the network. Suddenly they don't want to see TRICARE anymore. TRICARE patients anymore, or maybe the medical group for which you were going to seek your services, maybe they have since become saturated with services and the wait time is extended. Or in this particular case, maybe it was outside of the 100 miles. So in those cases, we would non-travel recommend. And some families are absolutely okay with traveling 100 miles. If it's like once a quarter, you know, that we got to take a look at, hey, is it every week? A lot of people don't want to drive 100 miles every week, but some might. So we want to give them that option to appeal and say, we are absolutely okay with driving, and then we take that into consideration. But if it's once a year, we're probably going to travel recommend 100 miles away.
Can you talk a little bit about, because with the portion of the question where it says very rare treatment, can you talk about optimal care a little bit? Because that kind of leads me to believe it could be something that maybe is either not covered by TRICARE or that it's something that the family's electing. That may be the case too as well. Maybe that's why. So it's hard sometimes for us to answer the questions when there's so many different avenues that could go down. So we do apologize. We try to do our best, but my mind reading skills are not that great right now. So we're trying to answer it as much as possible to kind of cover all the bases. So this is one avenue. Optimal care might be something that the family might be asking
So
about.
optimal care, and y'all got to help me with this. This one's always a challenge because at the end of the day, we know our families want to provide the absolute top-notch care that is available in the area. But what TRICARE does is look at what the benefits are that they provide service members and their family members. And so sometimes conditions require treatments that are outside of the TRICARE benefits, and they consider that optimal care. There are some TRICARE options to maybe consider if you're searching for what we call optimal care that is not covered, and that may be switching from prime to standard so that you can access that, and you might have to pay a copay. I don't know. I'm not a TRICARE expert. I should have started with that. But that being said, it's really hard because we know that everybody wants the best for their kids, but sometimes at the end of the day, TRICARE pays for what the benefits cover, and that optimal care is beyond that benefit. So,
And that's where that TRICARE standard of care comes into play,
Right.
and what they're legally required to provide to military healthcare beneficiaries, which is also what we look at on the assignment side is when the case will come to us or the request will come to us, we're looking, is the gaming base able to meet that? Has the special needs coordinator and the chief of medical staff or the SGH said, yes, they can provide what TRICARE is required to provide? If they can, then why can't the assignment stick? So if there's extenuating circumstances, and this is always going to be our answer, that's what we need to know, but we don't know until you tell us. So let us know. And if you don't have orders yet, perfect, because if you're supposed to leave next month and you don't have orders, it sounds like you need to report in a later than date delay. So let's go ahead and get in communication with each other so we can help you out on that aspect too, because we don't want you proceeding on assignment either if you are having a concern about it or anything along those lines. Mandatory movers, of course, that's something a little different, but we can at least be able to better advise you and give you specific information. So reach out first through, like we did with the ask a question on the Facebook page, and we'll be able to walk through that process and be able to guide you on how we can do that and get you started. So I think that was probably it.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you have anything on that one, Sandra?
No, not on that one.
Okay. This one's for you. I got one for you.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Is there a full-time EFMP family support coordinator at each installation? Can they help our family find a support group to connect with our new community?
Okay, got it. Yes, there is a full-time EFMP family support coordinator at every single major Air Force installation. And our EFMP coordinator, we don't want to get that confused with the special needs coordinator in the medical community, because a lot of times I think people do confuse the two. And so you'll hear us referred to as EFMP FS coordinator. But right now we have 97 full-time coordinators across the Air Force covering 78 installations. So as you know, some of our installations will have 2 or more coordinators in place to assist you, depending on the number of Q-coded airmen in a community. And they can help a family find a support group or connect with the new community. Because in Airmen and Family Readiness, we do provide non-medical case management. And so that's really important for folks to understand. And so sometimes people will ask us, well, what does that entail? Non-medical case management basically is providing a needs assessment for every family coming through our doors. And one thing that I want you to remember is the services that we provide on the Airmen and Family Readiness Center side is a little bit different because we provide services to everyone. So it's not just for those active duty airmen. We provide services to, of course, our retirees, our GSU families. It could be anyone. It could be a civilian with a special needs family member who needs assistance. So all DOD ID card holders are provided service. And one thing, and I think I'll talk about this a little bit later, but I do want to mention that we have a services plan now that we can offer to families. And this actually came about in this year. Non-medical, again, case management, but it's a congressionally mandated part of the program that we have to offer you a services plan. So when you go into your center to sit down with your coordinator, if they don't ask you about it, I want you to ask them, what does that services plan entail? And so if there are groups that you need to be a part of, say a support group, and it hasn't been established yet, we can look at, or the coordinators there can look at establishing a support group for you, just to be sure that you and your family's needs are being met. And so I'll kind of stop right there and wait until we go on to the next question, because I think we're going to talk about that a little bit more.
That's wonderful. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, next question. What does the assignment process look like for families that are mill to mill? Are there processes in place that will minimize the amount of time families that will face being geographically separated with respect to meal and understanding manning concerns? So this is kind of a broad question because the whole assignment process for military to military airmen is covered actually under a separate program called Joint Spouse. And there's actually a whole personnel services delivery guide out there that is fabulous, and it breaks down the entire process of how those assignments are worked. And so you can go out there on the EPUB site and pull that down, as well as MyPERS and AFPC's page, and pull everything down and look at it. The process is the same for EFMP assignments. So if you have a mill-to-mill family that's enrolled in EFMP for dependent, that process is going to run the same. Everybody's going to be selected in your own right for an assignment, and then as we go, if there's an issue or concern and an application is brought to us for a change of assignment, then we're going to work with both assignment and functional communities to make sure that the assignments can be matched up and manning supports at both locations before we start working the medical side. So that's how that process is going to work. Same as it does for any other mill-to-mill assignments under that PSD guide, that personal services delivery guide. The process is in place to be able to minimize the separation for geographically separated. I imagine that you're probably talking about if you have a member who has been selected for an overseas assignment, probably as a non-ball or a ball, and one gets dependent doesn't get cleared, what happens then? So if you look at on our Facebook page, what you'll see is one of the charts that talks about, it's kind of just a real quick visual slide that says, what are our options? That slide is actually just kind of a consolidation of the EFMP chapter, or now it's paragraphs, that talks about what happens when an assignment change needs to happen, or the options to airmen. So if that happens, the airmen will be looked at for, is there a short tour if they choose to go? So let me back it up, because I'm starting to get ahead of myself in my brain. So if an airman is selected, mill-to-mill, an airman is selected as a non-volunteer for an overseas assignment and does not get a travel recommendation or a service non-availability letter. What's going to happen is they're going to be able to come online and say, hey, AFPC, I need help because my family members can't come with me. So, of course, the first thing that we're going to look and do is see, can we cancel it? As a non-volunteer, you're number one on the top of the list as being the most vulnerable, number one non-vol. So that may not be an option. If it is an option, that's of course what we're going to look for. If we're also going to look and see, is there something else? Is there a kind of a like assignment, meaning is there a short tour that we can offer in its place? That's ultimately the goal, to be able to minimize that separation. So rather than send you to, say, Ramstein for 24 months unaccompanied because you have to go serve your fair share of overseas tours, we're going to look and see, can we do a 12-month tour somewhere else? And that's how we would work that process. It generally works out, and we're working really hard making sure that we can accommodate as much as possible. If you're in a situation and you're not finding that, please let us know, because that is something that we are definitely trying to stretch the limits on, because we do understand that mill-to-mill couples that have EFMP dependents, it is a little bit different for you. So we do want to make sure that we are minimizing, knowing that you already have family separation for deployments and things along those lines too as well on top of it. So we're not trying to add to that additional stress. Knowing that our EFMP families have a higher stress level anyway. So we can help with that too. So reach out, again, contact us and let us know, and we'll be able to work with you. Sorry, that was a long explanation. So there's a million different things that could come into play. So look at that slide and look at the options that are available to you, and then kind of see where you line up. And then if you don't see it, let us know, shoot us a message, and we'll walk you through your specific criteria and what you're eligible for. All right, next one. It's over to you. We're preparing for PCS in a few months. What can our EFMP Family Support Coordinator do to make this process easier for our family?
Okay.
Sandra?
Great. Thank you. So in this case, again, if you're getting ready to PCS, the first thing that you want to do, if you haven't done so already, is to stop into your Airmen and Family Readiness Center, visit your coordinator, talk to them about resources, and they'll go through a checklist with you on things that you may not think of. They can think of that for you. I think most importantly though, family support has been added to the virtual out processing checklist. And so even if you don't stop to think or stop over to the Airmen and Family Readiness Center, you will have to go over there or at least check in with them before you depart your losing base, because they are again on the virtual out processing checklist. So what they're going to do for you is they'll make that assessment for you if it hasn't been done so already, the family needs assessment. They will talk to you about the new congressionally mandated services plan, and be sure that all of your goals are set up and objectives are set up for your family to be successful as you transition to your gaining installation. And most importantly, I think, the whole reason we were added really was to ensure that there's a warm handoff that happens between installation or from installation to installation. And so I know a lot of families, because we didn't have a full-time coordinator at all of our installations, some families were moving and had never even heard of Airmen and Family Readiness Center's EFMP Family Support Coordinator. So this will not happen any longer. I think you're going to find that services have been set up for you. They will quickly assess you. They'll make the warm handoff. They'll talk about the services plan, goals and objectives for you, and then help you ahead of time to start navigating through some of those resources at your gaining installation. So there will be on the other end a coordinator waiting to assist you when you get there.
That's perfect.
Nice.
No, that's perfect. Absolutely. It's full service. Yes, ma'am. Okay, over to you, Colonel Hoy. I've got one for you. Is there an up-to-date expedited base list, and how does a base qualify as an expedited base?
Okay, awesome. So that's a good question. So I'll just run down the list of all of the expedited bases for you. First one we have is Hill Air Force Base in Utah. We also have Joint Base Langley Eustis in Virginia. We have Joint Base Andrews, and this includes Fort Meade in Maryland. We have Joint Base Anacostia Bowling, which includes the Pentagon, and obviously that's in the DC area. There's Joint Base San Antonio, which includes Lackland, Randolph, Fort Sam Houston, as well as Camp Bullis, and we are here in Texas. There's Los Angeles Air Force Base in California. We have MacDill Air Force Base in Florida, and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. And finally, we just recently, I want to say last year, added Nellis to the list. So how does the base qualify? Well, first and foremost, the base needs to be located in a pretty major metropolitan area with a robust healthcare network that's already established in the community and the surrounding areas. But for EFMP purposes, we kind of scrub all of the cases that have come through our office in the last few years to ensure that they have a 98% or higher acceptance rate for all of the packages that we send for. What that means is they have to say, yes, we can support your family in 98% of the cases that come through for their screening purposes. The only things that we do not include in terms of screening for the expedited process, there are two items that we will not process you as expedited for, and that is transplant services, as well as requiring inpatient or residential care upon PCS. Those cannot be routed expeditiously. We need to ensure that wherever you go, those services are available to support.
Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we've got another assignments one. I have a stateside to overseas long tour that I was a volunteer for. If my spouse is disapproved for travel or command sponsorship for her mental health needs, am I able to request them to cancel the assignment? Is there no option to be considered for them to give me a different assignment in this scenario? So that's two different things. So if there's a care or service non-availability notice that's provided, it's kind of like what we were talking about a little bit before. Yes, you can absolutely, that's when we want you to come online and say, AFPC, can you help please assist in a change of assignment? We definitely never recommend somebody going on an overseas assignment and taking a non-command sponsored dependent and proceeding to overseas location. It is just a whole bad bunch of juju. And there's a list out there posted on our Facebook page that has a whole list of things that that are not available to non-command sponsored dependents. And so we definitely make sure that everybody understands that, and that's something that you get briefed on by your special needs coordinator. So we definitely want you to reach out, absolutely, if that happens. The cancellation will be what we first look at. So if you're a mandatory mover, meaning if you have a code 50, so you're an MTL, MTI instructor, ROTC detachment, things along those lines, that's what we're going to look and see. Do you have a maximum tour, not a minimum tour where you can, your code says you have to stay at a base for a minimum of a certain number of years, but a maximum you have to move at the end of it. If you're a maximum tour mandatory mover, we're going to look and see where else we can relocate you to. We're going to work with your functional managers on that here at AFPC. They're going to say, yep, they're a mandatory mover. We're going to have to move them. So here's the list of bases. At that point, that's why it's really critical for you to put in your application other locations that you want us to consider, because it's a myth that we just disregard that. That's absolutely not true. We want to know where it is. Since you don't get that overseas assignment, where else is it that you're looking at going? We are going to look for CONUS locations, knowing that the overseas location is not available. It doesn't unfortunately mean that we're going to shop for another overseas location. It means that we're going to look for a CONUS location. So provide those locations in your application, so that way we can provide that to your functional community and say, hey, here's what they're asking for. How many of these does Manning support? And that's how we match it up and provide a new assignment. If you're not a mandatory mover though, so say you are just been on station for 2 years and you have no codes on you to be forced to move at the end or cause a reassignment, then it will just be canceled. And then you'll apply for another assignment and go forth and do with that one if the travel is approved. So it depends on the scenario and depends on what your status is. So mandatory mover versus non-mandatory mover. Again, go out there and look on our Facebook page and look at that chart that has what the options are available to an airman, because that actually breaks it down really well of what your options are as far as going forward. And if it's still not clear, then contact us and we'll talk to you about it specifically. Okay, I've got the next one for you.
Awesome.
Is it possible to require anyone going on a remote overseas assignment complete medical screening for dependents prior to departing? How can members enrolled in EFMP get reevaluated when living on a remote base?
Okay, so for the first one, you can do a medical screening, frankly, whenever you would like. In fact, it's actually encouraged that you keep your medical screening paperwork up to date as much as possible, given the instances where sometimes orders drop unexpectedly for short tours or short notice assignments. So it's always to your benefit to have paperwork that is current. And what we mean by current is within the last 12 months. Now, if over the last 12 months there are new conditions that have come or that have developed over time, or maybe some of the conditions have improved over time, it's also good to check back in with your EFMP office to let them know so that you can get your paperwork updated. Also, it's really important, so in terms of dependents, screening the dependents prior to departing. So if this is a remote overseas assignment, hopefully you have a follow-on assignment. You may not, but if you do, that's fantastic news. We can go on and screen your family for that follow-on assignment. Now keep in mind that 12-month time frame. So it might be to the benefit of you to wait until you're getting closer to coming from your original remote tour so your paperwork is up to date, so you don't have to reaccomplish that. So yes, if there's a follow-on assignment, absolutely. No assignment, that's really difficult because then we don't know where to screen. Second question, how can members enrolled in EFMP get reevaluated when living on a remote base? That one might have about 3-4 different answers depending on what it is that you mean by reevaluated. First thing that comes to my mind is maybe there's some educational needs and the child needs to be reevaluated for where they sit for related services that they receive within the school system, such as occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy, etc. The school would have to be able to provide their evaluation timeframes for you so that you can make sure that you get that accomplished. Now, this could also mean, in terms of if it's a remote base that's OCONUS, that really this question surrounds command sponsorship. And I'll leave that one for Ms. Schuler to answer for that. Oftentimes, when someone arrives in an OCONUS location and they ask for a reevaluation and it's not having to do with school, that tends to lead us to believe that maybe the family arrived in spite of a non-travel recommendation. So now we've got families in an OCONUS location where it was known they don't have services available, and now they're there and trying to get command sponsorship so that they can access some of the benefits. And that poses a lot of challenges, not only for the members unit, but across the board in EFMP with regards to the hardships you may ultimately face because there aren't the services available. Medical, the other financial hardships you might face. It impacts BAH, it impacts SOFA
agreements.
Yeah,
there's a lot of
your
things.
Visa, all kinds of stuff. Access to the commissary even.
Yeah.
So it's really important that if that's the reason we're wanting to get reevaluated, it's an uphill road to get command sponsorship. Unless your command is fully on board, it's really up to your commander and working with the assignments.
Absolutely. And I'll just add to really quick on this one. If there comes a time where there's an actual change in diagnosis or the care availability, and that's maybe where this question is going, and the services are no longer available at that location in the overseas area, please, that's when we definitely want to know too, so we can get you out of there if it was a command sponsor dependent. So non-command sponsored, it's a little bit different. We can walk you through that too, through the ERD process or the early return of dependents. But command sponsored dependents, we definitely want to make sure if you're guaranteed that service availability going over to the overseas location and something changed while you were over there, we want to make sure that we get you safely brought out so that we can get you to a location that can provide the services. And we do that, of course, in concert with the medical side. Did you want to mention something too, Sandra?
I think on this one, and we certainly don't ever recommend having your dependents travel when you received a non-travel recommendation. But in the event that something like that happens, you can go to the Airmen and Family Readiness Center and visit your EFMP Family Support Coordinator to talk to them about that and the community resources that are available. And we do know that in a lot of communities, for instance, such as Kunsan, the resources are going to be very stretched, so you're not going to get everything that you need. But we certainly don't want you to feel like you're alone there. So, visit the center and they will walk you through that and help you through the medical and also the assignments piece to get your family back to where they need to be.
Absolutely. So, great point. Okay, so the next one's a little bit of medical and a touch of family support too as well. It says we have 9 pieces of medical equipment that are used anywhere from 12 to 18 hours per day, causing enormous utility bills. Is there any way EFMP families can get financial relief or assistance with these high bills?
That's a really good question. In fact, I think this might be one that we got a similar one the last Facebook Live event. So after looking into it, I highly encourage you to look into the ECHO program, which is Extended Healthcare Option under TRICARE. So if you log into tricare.mil/ECHO, a page opens up and it gives you a whole list of resources available for the extended healthcare option. Some of that is financial, some of it is respite can fall under that. There's a number of resources that fall under there. So I really recommend you go to the website. You'll have to enroll in ECHO, and that's a very simple process. You simply show your EFMP enrollment letter and you submit that, and that should be good. They may ask for additional paperwork, but we should be able to assist you at our EFMP clinics for that. I also encourage you to call the electric company to see if they offer some special discounts for families with special needs. I know they do that for seniors and low-income families. I think there's a lot of programs out there that might be able to assist you. And to help you get to those resources in the community, I also recommend that you walk into the Airmen and Family Readiness Center, and I'll get that.
Right, thank you for that. And I'd like to mention, even before you call the utility company, I definitely would recommend visiting your coordinator there in the Family Center, because they can refer you to a certified financial counselor. We have certified financial counselors in all of our centers. They can assess your financial needs, maybe do a budget for you. They can get emergency financial relief for you a lot of times, but they will be able to take you through that process of ensuring that your utility bills are taken care of. And excuse me, we also, I want to mention, I didn't mention it before, but I talk about that we help, all communities. And so even for those members who are non-Air Force, we have a lot of joint communities in the Air Force or around DOD. And so, if you're from another service and you're here watching us this morning, I would recommend that you stop in as well, because if you're on one of our installations, you do belong to the Air Force. And so if you're Army or Navy or what have you from another service, if you're Guard or Reserve, you can also stop in. And as far as the utility bills, I would say, even if they can't refer you to, say, for instance, the Air Force Aid Society, then there's Navy relief. There are other relief societies for other services. So I don't want you to forget about that. So,
Excellent. It's like you two planned that. That was really smooth. I just will say that. So that's beautiful. We don't plan anything that happens here, trust me. Okay. Next one says, how can families get a more streamlined overseas option for knowing available bases when it's trying to try for a new assignment? Is there a way of contacting or reaching out to bases within the duty members AFSC to verify capabilities of the base to handle a diagnosis? I'm gonna actually give this one to you when you want to talk about the TRICARE Online portion and the military treatment, the reports, or I can handle.
No, I was thinking a different line
Go ahead.
for that one.
Go ahead.
So a lot, this kind of rhymes with pre-screening.
It does.
It does, and so reaching out to the bases, this one's really a challenge. There's a lot of discussion in the EFMP community about, hey, how come we can't pre-screen or find out what bases can treat certain conditions? Or why can't we have a tiering system where if you've got this range of conditions, then you're tier 1 and you can only go to tier 1 bases, which the Navy has tried that, and it's been very challenging for them, and they are actually going to discontinue that process as a result of the challenges they face. Reason being, again, and I back to point in time when it comes to services that are available in communities. So we can't predict at any given point what communities around the bases are going to have what services at any given time. The TRICARE network turns over so frequently that it's very difficult for us to get the most up-to-date list of what is available at each military installation. So that in and of itself is a challenge. But at the very tip of that, the most important part of this is that it is highly discriminatory to look ahead and to pre-screen and send you to certain places. That being said, is that you as a service member, like Kim said, you earn your assignments based on your own merit, and you get the choice to determine what is best for you and your family. We don't want to turn off a potential assignment that is exactly what you need for your career, especially if you've got your family completely taken care of in place. You may want to take that assignment And in fact, there are options. And is this where we're going to talk about options?
Absolutely.
So one of the options, again, is to appeal if you get a non-travel recommendation. Another option is to travel ahead, leave your family in place. That sounds to some on the front end very harsh. Just separate the family. But actually, families choose that sometimes. Reason being is it is a strong positive for the member's career, and maybe the spouse has a career and where they're currently located, and the children have a solid network of care where they are, their schools and their services they're receiving. It makes sense for the family to have that option to choose that you still go ahead to that assignment and leave your family behind. And the other option is to, if your family is in a critical juncture of care, you can request a deferment for up to a year. And again, also you can request a cancellation if there is a non-travel recommendation. This all comes back to the fact that in terms of the discrimination piece, if someone were to come to you and say, I'm sorry, you can't go to this base because you have a child with special needs, or on the flip side, you can only go to these bases because you have a child with special needs, that is discriminatory. And you should have the right to choose what is best for you and your family based on your current situation.
I'm going to jump in here really quick too. That's perfect, absolutely. And one of the things that we want to make sure is, and we're not against the pre-screening portion, we want families to be aware, but we don't have the ability currently to be able to say, reach out absolutely to each of those individual bases. Bases on the medical side, I know, are not staffed for that, to be able to answer all of those inquiries. But how you can kind of pre-screen for yourself and better prepare is by looking online through TRICARE Online, looking at the military treatment facility reports of what they currently are able to offer. Is it going to be an exact science? No. At this point in time, that's not where we are. Is that our goal? Perfect. Absolutely. Down the road? Yes. Is that millions of dollars? Yes, to get there. But that is our ultimate goal, is to be able to get to a place where you can look in a system and say, okay, my child has, or my spouse has this diagnosis. They require weekly, monthly care with this specialist. We can go to these specific bases right now. But here's the caveat. Colonel White talked about that point in time clearance. When you're talking assignments in conjunction with that, some assignments are 18 months out for report date. That snapshot that you see right now is not going to be probably what's available in 18 months. So you could look at it and match it up, and it makes perfect sense right then. But then when it comes time to travel, it may not be the same. So that's why we are hesitant of, and that's why I won't say hesitant, but that's why it's hard to get all of the players and all of the pieces to come together to provide that and tee it up for families. So do your research through that TRICARE Online and through the MTF reports to be able to see what services are available. That does give you a ballpark, I guess, if you want to say pre-screen, and you'll be able to look at that. But it does change on the regular, and that TRICARE fluctuation within the network can be really extreme depending on the location. So right now, that's what we can offer. Going forward, of course, we are nonstop working on different ways to improve it. And that's what we spend the majority of our time trying to find, different assignment ways, different medical ways to help out with that too as well, which is why we provide so many options too for airmen, so that we're just not locking you into an assignment and saying, hey, you absolutely have to go. So kind of keep that in mind too as well. Okay, so gonna move on to the next one. Did you have anything on that one, Sandra? No. Okay, we're good. Sorry, I said no, we're fine. Okay, here we go. My child is EFMP for education. I'm Q coded and do not have a follow-on assignment for my next duty station. My family resides near Luke Air Force Base, where my child has had the same individual education team for the last 4 years. There's no position open for my AFSC at Luke for my DROS. I'm waiting to see if I get selected for first sergeant with results in July. In order to support the EFMP, will the evaluation of my next assignment be according to what the program managers believe will meet my child's needs, or take into consideration of the current team she is with? If it is recommended that she stay with her education team, what can I do to apply this to my records before the decision process for my next duty assignment? So I will say, on this portion, if there's a specific requirement for a child to stay in one location, your best bet, no kidding, is to ask for EFMP reassignment based off of that and say, I have to be reassigned back to my original location. That may mean you have to, if you're not selected for first sergeant duty, to retrain, be open to retraining, something along those lines. But I will say that the threshold is going to be high because we have lots of airmen that have children that have an individual education plan with education teams that are reassigned constantly. Well, not constantly, but they are reassigned regularly. And that is just the military, lifestyle. So it has to be something very, very specific. So if it's something that's above average for, it's not just a regular IEP, there's more extreme needs involved, then definitely make sure you put that application in, but ask for an actual EFMP relocation reassignment through the virtual MPF and provide all the documentation. So DD Form 2792 that's current on your child, a copy of the DD Form 2792-1, which is the educational form, a copy of the current IEP, any additional input from the specialist that's saying that your child has to stay with that team and why, because we're going to need to be able to take a look at that. We'll have our medical review board take a look at that. We'll also more than likely consult with Colonel Hoyt and her team at AFMOA, because if that's something that's on the precedent side, then we need to make sure that they're brought into the loop on that one too as well. And did you have anything on that one too as well, Ms. Sandra?
I think on this one, I think we're good, but I will simply add that no matter where you are in the assignment process, your needs will be met. We do have a school liaison. We used to say school liaison officers. We now refer to them as school liaisons located on every single installation. You can always check with your school liaison and see, if your needs are being met or your child's needs will continue to be met there in place. There's also military family life counselors located in most of the schools around DOD. You can also check in with them. So that's just, a concern that you don't have to, I don't want to say worry about, but a concern that, you don't have to be as concerned about because their needs are going to be met whether you go on to that assignment or stay. And so that's just a service that a lot of people may not realize that is available. And so something to think about.
It's absolutely wonderful. And it's wonderful when you think about the Air Force, and DOD in particular provides that for active duty members, and compared to a corporation, that's something that is not offered on the outside. Sometimes I forget.
No, it isn't.
Yes.
It isn't.
And that's a great resource. Okay, moving on to the next one. Autism is an incurable disability that requires special needs in schools. I recently found during an EFMP PCS, the base isn't required to verify if the local schools can meet the requirements contained in the IEP. Why aren't parents notified of this beforehand? Why are you preventing families being located in areas that don't truly meet the needs of the EFMP member? Is that not the purpose of the EFMP? So I'm going to turn this one right over to you, Colonel Hoyt, and let you have that one.
So when it comes to educational needs and related services, schools are federally mandated to provide the services, those related services that are identified on a current IEP. So if the IEP for your child says they need speech, occupational, and physical therapy, then that school is federally mandated to provide it. Some schools don't have those personnel on staff, and I have seen instances where they will bus the children who require that to the next community in order to receive those services, because again, they are federally mandated. The challenge with the educational side is, we do not necessarily screen for what the school has because again, it's a mandated program within the states, but we can look ahead and request through the DODEA process, hey, do they have these services? But that too fluctuates based on the school's funding, and there's a number of things that ties into that. But that being said, there are also changes that happen with the children, as they move in PCS. So if you've been at a current location for 3 years and they've been receiving all of those services, the intent there is to maintain stability or to improve in areas which are their IEP goals. So over 3 years, your child may have improved. They still have the current IEP, but when you PCS to your new duty station, they're going to reevaluate you to see where you fall at that time. And at that point, it may be that your child has improved and may not require certain things, and a new IEP will be written. Excuse me. And so some parents feel that maybe their child still needs speech therapy, but when they get to the school and they're reevaluated, the test shows that they may not need it. And so that causes some frustration and sometimes disappointment that they're not getting all of those services. And it's simply because in that new state, they have tested out of that program. But that's not to say they can't be reevaluated at any time. So again, you know, if you've been living in Massachusetts where educational system is top notch and all the services are very highly engaged, and say you get orders to Maxwell, Alabama, where the services aren't as robust, or maybe they're further away, you're going to find too that when you move from state to state, they also have different, when you are being reevaluated, you might find that they don't necessarily meet the criteria within that state at that given time. So that's one of those hard moving targets. But you should be getting your services at that school because they're federally mandated.
And I will say this, and then I'm going to turn it over to Sandra. We actually, Colonel White and I went to Illinois, to Scott Air Force Base for a symposium for EFMP. And one of the things that we had the ability to, or had the opportunity to do was sit in on a rights law 2-day course. And I will tell you the biggest key is the education piece as advocates. So I learned a lot of brand new things I had no idea about. I'm glad to bring back some great resources, but I will say education on the IEP portion, that's where family support comes in, and they offer a ton of things that has to do with IEPs and the school portion. So Sandra, can you kind of fill them in on some of the things that you guys offer?
Sure. On that, I do want to put our school liaisons again, and they don't fall under the Airmen and Family Readiness Centers any longer. That program actually falls under our Child and Youth Services. But just as Colonel Hoyt mentioned, all states are federally mandated to provide these services to your children. We don't really have any oversight of that. But if it comes to the point where you see that the services are not being provided, you can check with your school liaison to have them talk to you about filing an appeal. You can certainly do that. And then, of course, there are all kinds of support groups and networks that have been set up to teach you how to go into those IEP meetings and properly advocate for your children. We get that question a lot. Unfortunately, we can't go in with you in those meetings. We're just not allowed to do that under Airmen and Family Readiness. But there are also PTIs, or parent training institutes, I guess, that are set up around all of the states, and they can get an advocate for you to go in and help you advocate for your children's needs. And so some of our centers actually, maybe this is what you saw, they actually will offer a workshop and just teach you how to do that, because there's a kind of a little bit of a science to that. But I think bottom line here is, if you find that the school is not meeting the needs of your children, just as you mentioned, Colonel White, bottom line is check with your school liaison, and they can help you to maybe file an appeal if that's necessary.
And also elevate this information through your school system, because if they literally are not providing a required service that's in the IEP, you can elevate that through your congressperson to bring attention and bring light to that. And that may require that you can reach out for some legal support in that, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that would like to jump on school districts that aren't taking care of their special needs kids.
And something just in closing this out, something you said, the services do vary,
Right.
state to state. Some states are going to have more robust services than others. And we've heard this before, the transition of students as they move, not only state to state, but sometimes school district to school district,
Absolutely.
can be an issue.
And just real quickly, I'm sorry, I know we're running out of time. So, but one of this is, why aren't parents notified about this? And so that's a great question. We need to do better. We need to do better about informing our families about some of the challenges, or just bring light to it. It may not be a challenge, but at least giving you the information so you're aware before you go. What we are planning to roll out here in the very near future is a base-wide orientation, where this is a town hall type environment that will be represented by each of your local components with regards to medical, your MPS, as well as your family support. And they're going to be able to provide you all of the information. And this is for new EFMP families. It'll be mandatory for new EFMP Q-coded members, but families can come whenever they want, and you can ask any question that comes up during your stay there, and they can also provide you guidance at the local level. That's not officially rolled out yet, but it's coming.
And I will say that's a great transition, because EFMP assignments, you will see posted on our page our video. So each one of us component leads is videotaping and we've done our portion and videotaped ours. That'll be presented by the base. So you'll be able to see that here on the Facebook page and be able to watch that, which talks about some of the things we talked about today, but also talks about some additional assignment information that you may be interested in too. So there's 3 questions we didn't get to. So what we're going to do afterwards is type the answers and the questions in the comments blocks once we get back to our desks. And then if you have any questions that didn't get answered, leave them out there on Facebook. We'll be able to roll those into the 1630 Central Central Daylight Time. Thank you. Yeah, I need some more coffee. Central Daylight Time session, and we thoroughly appreciate the questions. We thoroughly appreciate you guys tuning in. We appreciate the feedback that you provide and keeping in contact with us and letting us know what is working and what isn't working. We've got a lot of exciting things still going on, so we look forward to updating you on those things too as well here coming up here pretty soon too. So as for us, we're going to sign off, but thank you so much from AFPC.